to know that if you are and have a goal of being the world's hegemon, that having also a goal of coexisting peacefully would mean that those are sort of antithetical to one another, right? I don't think human beings really have that capability to have two big power influences in a region or the world and coexist. At some point, it's going to come to some sort of fight or a war, and there will be a winner. And I think the Chinese know that, and I think that the Chinese use a lot of doublespeak and the way that they say things, just as much as the United States does, right? Because both of us have that goal of maintaining world hegemony and then try to attain to global hegemony the way that the Chinese are. So for me, the way I view this is like you can say as much as you want that you want to coexist, but you don't ramp up military capability and steal tech and try to outmaneuver somebody else just to be a peer. You do it on purpose to overtake that person eventually. We are here. It's Joaquin Camarena from Sino Talk. We've had you on before, man. I appreciate you coming back. This is always a good conversation. This one will be a little different because every time you and I have talked about China, which is the main theme of these conversations and the main theme of the content you produce, every time we've talked, Joe Biden has been president. And so everything we discuss in the way the relationship with the United States and China has been very different, right? And now, yeah, there it is. The tinfoil hat has come back out. And but the relationship between China and the United States now with Donald Jaquarius Trump is going to be much different and already has started to be much different. And yeah, man, hey, listen, dude, I saw that joke one time. People are making a joke about how, like, he's a felon, he's got multiple wives, all this shit, and they're like, he's the real first black president, which is funny. So, you know,
especially with the middle name, I said that same thing. I was like,
Donald J, it's Jaquarius, dude.
Yeah.
Donald Jaquarius Trump. And but that relationship looks like a lot differently. So, and we have a lot to talk about now, for sure. And I feel like a more optimistic outlook, at least with the relationship between the United States and the Chinese. We'll also jump in on some other stuff with the Arctic and the Chinese military. And we'll go talk about Xi's Little Red app, which is directly referenced as Mao's Little Red Book, which I think is crazy. It should just show you just how little Americans remember and learn about history in the first place. Mao's Little Red Book was quite literally propaganda meant for the Chinese people at the time. And, you know, a bunch of Americans went over there as some form of weird protest, probably the dumbest protest I've seen in a while. But we joked about it on the live fire and called it the new migrant crisis. Because everybody jumped off of TikTok, made all their snot-nosed cry faces. Oh no, TikTok, I'm going to miss it. Like it was senior graduation video, you know what I mean? Like, been a great 4 years, guys. You know, Miss Johnson, thanks for everything. And yeah, that's, you know, and then it was back 2 days later, like they all look like fucking idiots. But I guess you could say, like, if you could trust anything on that app, people were talking at regular Chinese citizens and American citizens from what it seemed, right? I'm sure that the Red app and all these other apps, TikTok, Instagram included, are all filled with Chinese spies. But I guess at least people were relating to one another. I guess you could say there's a positive there, but it's not a positive because that app is full of bloat and spyware, even worse than TikTok is. So, but brother, please introduce yourself. Let's quantify who you are at first and why you're able to speak on some of these things. And then let's jump into the conversation. I'll let you sort of lead the way on this. But I've already said it before. We're going to talk about China. China.
Hi, guys. China. Hi, guys. My name is Joaquin Camarena. I done a lot of studying within China. Actually lived there sporadically for a 3-year period from 2017 to 2019. Written a lot of stuff regarding China. Not only that one, but also, you know, different subjects within the Indo-Pacific region as well for Atlas News and other outlets as well. And I'm currently focusing on redoing Sino Talk and being able to produce videos for, you know, for the content that I produce. So that certainly is going to be coming out soon, hopefully. So
awesome. And you were in the Marine Corps for a while too, right?
Yes, I was in the Marine Corps as an anti-analyst for 5 years too. So I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have like a really good foundation regarding the PLA as well. So
Right.
No, absolutely. Um, Obviously, like we just said, the inauguration is over. Or excuse me, Donald Trump is in office, and there's already been some ripple effects around the world in a lot of different ways. Donald Trump said, yeah, just today he made it public. He said that Xi Jinping called him today. You know the context of that conversation? Called him yesterday, something like that.
he called him yesterday. I believe he wanted to like congratulate him and say like, yeah, we're gonna be we want to make restart or reset Chinese American relations to make it a win-win for both countries. Um, Donald Trump, I believe he said, we're able, China and the United States, with both of us with Xi Jinping and himself at the helm of either country, they could handle anything. Which it's kind of funny because like those two leaders proven during the first term, not really. So it's kind of like it's very enlightening to see that, or at least funny that they've kind of put the context of their call in that fashion, but not really in a sense, because realistically it's just going to be China War 2.0. So
Yeah, so here's the way I view those sorts of the language that they use is all posturing, saying there are two leaders that they can get things done together. It's a win-win situation. Like neither of them mean that, right? Donald Trump is home team all the way as far as that goes, just as much as Xi Jinping is home team there all the way. And so any sort of conversation like that is all just blowhard, superficial talk that you hear people say, political speak, right? And to me, like, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think Donald Trump has any real intention of being an equal, right, in that regard, and the way that sort of language implies with Xi Jinping, just as much as Xi Jinping has no intention on being equal with the United States. They both view themselves as better than the other as far as they're concerned. And they view their countries as being the hegemon, or one should be the hegemon and one shouldn't, right? And so any sort of language like that is like I said before, posturing, and they both have intentions on, well, China being number one and the United States remaining number one, right? So that relationship is going to be dictated by those terms, whether it's said that way or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the only reason why I was going to interrupt you is to point out that these statements that they produce, a little less so for Donald Trump, is that, they're choreographed items that, the State Department or the Chinese Foreign Ministry of Affairs would actually produce themselves, or put out, or, have the president say, to make it not sound so Belarus, because I could foresee the conversation between them two as being not the kindest, if I'm going to use that language, that type of language.
A laconic conversation.
Yeah, like I would assume at the very least it was very frank and to the point between the two, because
Correct.
that's who they are at the end of the day. Xi Jinping is very, he's a very frank individual. He's not going to, he's not very sophisticated. He's not going to he's going to speak his mind. And then on the flip side, you have Donald Trump, who is, unsophisticated to a degree. I will say he is sophisticated in some aspects, but he's also going to speak his mind as well, and he doesn't really care. So you have those two individuals, just so happen to be the leaders of the two most powerful countries in the world. They're going to have some frank discussions, if not rancorous discussions.
Well,
No, go ahead.
Let's talk about some of the ways that the Chinese and the United States are sort of unlinking themselves economically, right? Because if you look at the past, and economic ties have not necessarily been the sufficient mitigation for physical conflict as a lot of people have anticipated them being. Prior to World War One, there was a book written. I can't remember the name of it. I'd have to look it up. But essentially, it was implying that thanks to the Industrial Revolution and the industrial interconnectedness and the economic interconnectedness of Europe, that the European continent would never see a conflict like it had during the Franco-Prussian War or during the Napoleonic Wars ever again, because of the Industrial Revolution and their economic ties. And obviously, that wasn't right. So economic ties can be a mitigator, I guess you could say, for conflict up to a point, but definitely unlinking economic ties and sole sourcing things from your country and ramping up, especially on the Chinese behalf, ramping up military tech and development. Those are things that indicate that the drums of war are definitely thumping. So I'm just kind of interested. Let's talk about some of those ways the United States and China are unlinking themselves before we kind of jump into what some of the plans we think Donald Trump has for the Chinese-American relationship.
Well, I don't think they're trying to de-link themselves. At least they've realized that they can't. I have my tinfoil hat on, literally. We have, in the first, in the first half of the Trump's first presidency, we had, a lot of talk about, we're going to, totally de-link the Chinese and U.S. economies. But realistically, I think someone told Donald Trump and Xi Jinping that, if you de-link these economies, we're fucked.
The Chinese have stopped doing certain exports and things like that to the United States now, though. Certain rare minerals, things like that.
Yeah, but you have to look at it in the context of of not only why they do it, but then also why, or at least why now, when they do it, because they only started doing that very recently, and that's only because as a tit for tat measure against our semiconductor section controls and other items related to that. But realistically, China can try to, do these export controls against, these rare earth minerals, but the United States can, go and find more, such as in Greenland.
Which is why the whole hullabaloo about Greenland.
Exactly. Africa, Latin America. So realistically, China is not really doing anything but hurting itself, because they need to produce finished materials, or at least the inputs to make those finished materials. Because China's economy is, despite them being trying to say that they have a developed economy, is still heavily reliant upon manufacturing, even to this day, which is one of the reasons why they have not been able to, successfully overcome its economic difficulties. But regarding, attempts to try to, de-link themselves, the United States have done a pretty good job at, semiconductors and its related enterprises, not only through its own companies, such as, Intel, but with other countries as well, like South Korea, Samsung, NXP in the Netherlands, of course, Taiwan.
TSMC now has a plant in Arizona, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I believe they have one of the biggest ones outside of Taiwan, in which that one, if they could ever get it fully online, that would actually help the United States to become semi-independent regarding semiconductor production. But other ways that they're trying to decrease, or at least de-link, is through on China's side, food production, because they
You say food
realized that,
production?
or at least food imports, at least. Because China realized that if we keep buying soybeans from uh, farmers in Arkansas, then they can actually be sanctioned for this. They can actually prevent them from buying it,
Oh,
and
okay.
or pork in the Midwest states. Because two things that the Chinese people love, is their pork and soybean sauce, or any soybean really. And so they
Can't go wrong,
realized
dude.
that we
Not a
need
bad
to,
combo.
yeah. No, it is not. But for the Chinese government and Xi Jinping, they realize this is kind of a negative for them. And
Hey, can you do me a
so
favor when you
that's
talk? Can you talk that close like you are right now to your mic a little bit more?
yeah. I apologize.
Pre-
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
So
Appreciate it.
no. So when you talk about that, I mean, they try to prevent. They try to at least pivot away from being reliant on the United States, but they realize that no country can produce as much soybeans or any other food products like the United States. I mean, yeah, Brazil can produce it, but realistically, that's like a drop in a bucket. Argentina can produce beef, drop in a bucket of what we produce. But and so even in the case, Brazil and Argentina, they don't really want to play ball with the Chinese because they don't really want to run afoul with the United States, because realistically, you kind of see this with the Philippines, with China. They're in the United States. They're in the United States backyard, even though they
Well,
have developed. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, finish your sentence real quick, and I want to say,
No, because even though they develop economic ties with China, realistically, at the end of the day, they will still have to rely on the United States for other stuff, such as diplomacy and security as well. So it's one of those things where you have to do the lesser of two evils. You have to pick the lesser of two evils, in which Brazil would obviously pick, the United States, or at least become neutral, whereas Argentina would just say no to Xi Jinping and just go with the United States under
it's
Malai.
so interesting because of obviously there's a couple things that come to mind here. So you were talking about beef production and the United States. We had on a guest not that long ago. His name is AJ Richards. He has a business called From the Farm, which I encourage everybody
Hmm.
to go check out. But the one thing that he made a point of on the podcast is how the Batista brothers in Brazil, they produce and essentially export to the United States about 80% of like the beef and chicken that comes in the United States. And they have this monopoly on that industry there in Brazil. And that the United States is highly dependent upon Brazil for those two proteins. And so it's interesting to hear you say that because the United States is very dependent on Brazil for those things. Not to say the United States couldn't start producing, beef and everything and stop being dependent on Brazil, because we absolutely could, to your point. So I just wanted to put that out there contextually. But the other thing too is the first letter in BRICS is Brazil, right? So
Hmm.
it's just interesting to see, like, they'll go with the win, whatever they think is going to be the most advantageous for them. And signing up for BRICS is definitely a step in, kind of putting your fingers into wherever you think you're going to wind up with the most success. But that sort of interconnectedness on this side of the world that the United States should have with these countries, sort of the Monroe Doctrine idea about the United States being, the dominant hegemon on our side of the world, right? As well with these countries. It's unfortunate that we have to compete with a country like China in those places. And it's also interesting and when you learn about the way the Chinese conduct their diplomatic relations with these countries, especially like in Africa, which we've talked about on other podcasts, to see some of these developments and the way the United States needs to gain back ground, in my opinion, with those places, especially things like the Panama Canal, which has become a very hot item over the past couple weeks too. Would love to get your thoughts on the whole Panama Canal situation too. At some point, whenever you're finished painting the picture you're painting, but It's a pretty crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, regarding Chinese, I guess increase in Chinese influence within the Latin America, you have to think about it as this: we were so focused upon other regions, i.e., the Middle East, for probably about 20 years, that really didn't really care to look at any other region, let alone Latin America, which has always been seen as the bastard of the regions. SOCOM knows this especially. And so it's not surprising. It's saddening to hear the picture that I'm painting right now is that it's one of neglect on part of the United States, because we always assumed that these countries would naturally gravitate towards us because we were there always. We were the main power there.
Played a lot of
Neglecting
political games in those countries, though.
Exactly, neglecting that we were there, but we did some stuff during the Cold War that they may not necessarily like, and they still have some grudges to hold, which they do. They do. And we can't really fault them for that because from their perspective, we were in a way the Yankee invader, the Yankee internal
Right.
Yankee intruder in our internal matters. But then you have this. But then you have this country, China, come in and just literally just start handing out money like it's Oprah, um, and so not only in a bid to increase influence within the region, but also to gain economic leverage. Because in the case of Peru, they recently built or inaugurated a mega port along its coast that is seen as the main conduit to actually wean the United States, wean China off of any maritime traffic going from Latin America to China. So essentially, because before that port became a reality, all maritime traffic, if it wanted to cross from Latin America to China, it would have to go through the port of Long Beach, because that was literally the only country, or literally the only port on the East Coast close enough, or West Coast, I would say, on the West Coast, close enough to be able to handle, not only the cargo of the capacity cargo, but then also to be able to, it was also the closest in proximity. The Latin America, Southern California, it's a relatively easier route compared to, Seattle. So now that's been taken away. And China knows this, and so China actually did this to wean himself off of that dependence upon Long Beach. So now just one big straight shot from Peru to China, and they plan on exactly. It's not. It's a good thing for China and a good thing for Peru, because the Peruvian economy needs it. Now, there probably is some corruption. There was some corruption going on there at that port. Yeah, so I mean, irregardless, they both needed it. Or, however, it kind of illustrates the United States' inability to at least prevent that port from coming into being.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It shows that shows a lack of influence in our own side of the world, essentially. And I think we talked about this before, and how the Chinese have a much more successful approach at these relationships because they go into them building infrastructure, right? And like when I was in Africa, there's all kinds of Chinese infrastructure over there. And it's interesting because I learned about that from being deployed to Africa, just how much Chinese infrastructure is there. And ports are a big thing. Obviously. And then roads, power, all of this stuff, schools, buildings, apartment complexes, all this, they just go in and they build all this stuff. And like, this is, when we talked about, 20 years of GWAT and hearts and minds, like this is the way to do it, right? And they have done that very effectively, especially across the African continent. Though a lot of Africans, you can see, especially over the past couple years, have gotten very fed up with having the Chinese there because they're assholes and they don't do business fairly. I mean, it's just being real. Like, if you talk to them, they're douchebags, and they see themselves. And not to say that Americans don't, right? And not to say that Americans don't see themselves as better than other countries, right? But the Chinese are, I feel like, definitely a lot more upfront about it business-wise, in that sort of way. Not to mention, they don't ever get flack unless it's from the United States for mining practices and child labor, and that seems in their carbon emissions. Those things seem to get lost on the global community, right? And I think that China has a way of, or a hand in the controlling of that narrative as well. But the going back to our side of the world here, it is unfortunate, and you're right. And this is a very stark indicator of how the United States has mismanaged these relationships when really we just have had everything to gain from them, and are only now, trying to pivot toward having better relationships. And we'll see what happens with the Panama Canal. That conversation hasn't gone well. Go ahead.
No, I was going to bring the Central America up because I like to cut off Latin America and Central America and talk about them because they're two separate regions. Not only that, because how Taiwan comes into play with that. And the interesting case study, at least I call it a case study, is how Honduras pivoted from recognition of Taiwan to recognition of China in a span of, I think, 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
And going back to your point, Brandon, that you talked about the use of money, use of building infrastructure. That's actually how they've gained enough influence to pull Honduras away, because they promised, infrastructure, investment, we'll cover all your debts, especially with Taiwan, because Honduras had like over $5 billion worth of debt with Taiwan, I believe.
Yeah.
Or at least they tried to essentially extort Taiwan to say, hey, we're willing to keep diplomatic relations with you, but we need you to pay off all of our debts, all $5 billion of it. And the Taiwanese said absolutely not. This is extortion. And then Honduras like, peace. We like China. But in the aftermath of that, for all the talk of investment, for all the talk of bringing jobs to Honduras, being able to export their wares, Honduran products to China, it didn't materialize. Matter of fact, the Honduran economy is actually worse off now than it was when they had actual relations with Taiwan. You hear a lot of small and medium-sized business owners complain now that, because of cheap Chinese products, they're losing businesses or they're going out of business. So it's one thing for them to, and going back to your point, Brandon, the fact that, they've, about Africa, they don't really like them, that's the reason, because they're able to drive out people using the Walmart method, essentially being able to bring in cheap products, like thousands of dollars worth of cheap products, and be able to sell them at a loss, essentially, and push out all the mom and pop stores and small businesses to where you can only rely on the Walmart now. It's the same principle, but just different Chinese shops.
Yeah.
But yeah, so regarding the Panama Canal, I think a lot of it has been reacted to, I guess the best word for it, because Because the PLA, with Trump, he said that the PLA is operating the canal. I mean, like it's they're not. I mean, they're obviously not. Um, do they have influence along the canal? China does. They do. They actually have a lot of investment within the canal. The infrastructure that is being used by the canal. And I think Trump understands that and realizes that that's a bad thing because, for one, what it can lead to.
Yeah.
Or at least what it could potentially lead to. And then on top of that, Trump he doesn't like it whenever, we see something that, China is benefiting from. And so that's the reason why he's trying to say that, hey, we want to, we want to take back the canal. We want to prevent China from using it. That's the reason why, to prevent China from gaining leverage over it. Because, I've been asked many... go ahead.
I was just going to say, and here's the other idea with it too. I mean, the U.S. uses it for military purposes as well, right? And if you consider just like some of the, back in 2021, the Ever Given, which is a ship that it crashed, I guess you could say, in the Suez Canal, and it stopped up all that traffic. And that was for a very long time. And it led to the redirection of a bunch of ships being stuck inside that canal. And obviously that's a global issue because you're talking about supply chain and all these other things. But if you cut that off, the United States, and it's closed up, the United States to use, I mean, what's the other way to get to the Pacific Ocean from this side? It's going around the southern tip of South America, right? And that's a lot further than cutting right through. So there's some military strategic issues and concerns that go into this as well.
Exactly. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, they would have to go through the Strait of Magellan, which it's also called something else in Spanish. Essentially means like this passageway is extremely bad. Please don't go there.
No kidding.
The context of it's like one of the worst.
EU sail here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty bad passage to sail through. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why they've built the Panama Canal, not only for the increased trade, but decrease time, but also to stop losing ships. Because if you lose a ship, I mean, back at that time when the Panama Canal was built, that's like $10,000 or like thousands of dollars back then. Now it's like millions of dollars depending upon the ship. And so a lot of people forget about that fact because they only talk about trade and like the easy movement of ships, but we'll be losing a lot more ships if we have to go through the Strait of Magellan.
Well, if there's a response needed out to the Pacific region by our military, traveling through the Straits of Magellan takes a lot longer than going through the Panama Canal. So it's about time, which would be definitely of the essence in an instance like that.
Exactly, and the ironic thing is that the Japanese thought about bombing the canal. They actually were planning to do it, but the war ended before they could.
Wow,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
What was the sort of reception to the news there about the Panama Canal and Trump in China, Chinese media and politically?
They've discounted it. Like, they wouldn't have acknowledged it to where like, yeah, we have control over it. What are you gonna do about it? No. But it was more of a trying to say they don't control it. China doesn't control it. We don't interfere with internal affairs of other countries. Just don't ask Myanmar about that. But whenever you look at like what the citizens are saying on the Chinese internet and Chinese social media, they make fun of it. They make jokes. yeah, we must be controlling the Chinese have to be, in control of everything. We have to be spies. Then some actually do talk about, like, do advocate for China to actually take over the Panama Canal. Some of the more popular Chinese nationalists have actually came and made videos of it, saying that, yeah, we need to take over this canal because it's ours. How? Because we're China.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
That's a pretty insidious, yeah, notion there, though. That's a CCP notion, wouldn't you say?
It's somewhat. It's somewhat, but you also have to understand whenever you talk about those Chinese nationalists, they are, depending upon the topic, will be used by the Chinese government or CCP to voice their stance on certain matters. And I think the fact that you have to look for those certain videos and posts on Chinese social media websites and the equivalent of YouTube.
Yeah.
It says a lot that they're not condoning it, but they're not amplifying it either. So it's kind of points. So it kind of tells me that we're not saying that we won't do it, that we're not doing it, but we're not saying that we won't do it.
Right.
Hint.
Yeah.
So.
I'm wondering if you can explain to everybody the feeling, I guess you could say, in China now that Trump has been president for a few days.
Well,
a week.
They're thinking that it may improve, but given the fact that what Trump said, and then also this first term, they understand that that's a wish that will never come true. And in fact, many people have said that, like, we need to start preparing for the worst. And in fact, the Chinese government has been doing that since late December. They've been trying to, as I mentioned before, as we talked about, earlier, that the not semiconductor, but the rare earth export controls, the increased emphasis on trying to fix their economy. These are all actions that the Chinese government and Chinese Communist Party are doing to save, or to at least insulate themselves from whatever Trump has on his mind to do to China. Now, Chinese netizens, they kind of have the same approach. Some are saying, maybe this is a good thing because it would actually make us more reliant on the global south, the third world, if you will. They actually specifically point out Africa and, India in that regard, in which, China actually has done a lot to try to repair that relationship with India, and also, expand its relations with, Africa as a whole. But then also try to at least pivot towards, certain countries in Europe, like Germany, Hungary, of course, Russia, whatever, in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, of course, the UAE, those countries, try to at least wean them, or at least insulate themselves from the worst that Trump has to offer them in terms of economic sanctions. So it's not, I think the best way to summarize this is that they understand what's coming, but they're optimistic that it may change, but they know it's not going to happen.
Okay.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, or at least I sound contradictory, but on some level they think, it could change. But looking back at what happened with, with Trump the first time, and what he said, they know it's going to be like trade war 2.0.
Yeah. I was gonna say this change they think about happening, like they are viewing this change, to keep using your word, as like a net positive for both countries where we can coexist, or as a good change as far as like China being able to keep on this path of trying to be the dominant force around the world. So it's good for them. Which do you mean?
I think it would be a little bit of both because, they understand that, like, they want to coexist with the United States, whatever that will look like. But they also know that, China is trying to ascend itself, trying to become, the hegemon by, their 100-year anniversary, 2029. And so
49.
with that regard, what's that?
You mean 49?
Yeah, 49. Did I say? Oh, okay. I thought I
You said 49. Yeah. No, I just want to make sure people. Yeah, you said 49, but yeah, 49, 2049.
2049. Thank you. But yeah, like trying to make the rejuvenated country, or trying to restore them to greatness by 2049, which is the 100-year anniversary of China's founding, or the PRC's founding.
I would say I would push back on it a little bit and say that it's very evidenced in history, and the Chinese are very good at history as well. They have much more history than the United States, right? That they should know that, rising powers and existing powers like these will have a collision course, and we already are bumping heads, right? To know that if you are and have a goal of being the world's hegemon, that having also a goal of coexisting peacefully would mean that those are sort of antithetical to one another, right? I don't think human beings really have that capability to have two big power influences in a region or the world and coexist. At some point, it's going to come to some sort of fight or a war, and there will be a winner, right? Whatever that looks like, winner-wise. And I think the Chinese know that, and I think that the Chinese use a lot of doublespeak in the way that they say things, just as much as the United States does, right? Because both of us have that goal of maintaining world hegemony and then try to attain to global hegemony the way that the Chinese are. So for me, the way I view this is like you could say as much as you want that you want to coexist, but you don't ramp up military capability and steal tech and try to outmaneuver somebody else just to be a peer. You do it on purpose, to overtake that person eventually, and that's the goal. That's who human beings are. I think that's just, we have a naturally competitive. We're just naturally competitive, and that is what happens. Eventually, people will fight it out. Like two bullies at school, right? Eventually one of them will have a fight with one another. So to me, I think that would think that the Chinese are aware of that, and so any sort of speak about coexisting in the United States is bullshit.
No,
I
agree. I mean, like, no, I understand. I mean, like, this is what, when I say coexistence, that's like what a lot of the Chinese government, that's what they say in their statements, but it also, a lot of the, Chinese citizens, that's what their hopes and dreams are. I mean, that's their hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
Well,
should divorce the CCP as well from the common Chinese person, I think, to a degree, right? Because Chinese people have nationalism as well, and just like Americans do, and those two types of nationalism may look differently, but you can't go to war without having the backing of your people. So while you should divorce the CCP or the U.S. government from its people, the common person, to some degree, eventually, like there really is only one way to view that, and that it is a unified front.
Yeah, no, I agree, but regarding whether or not they want to go to war, you kind of don't really see that on Chinese social media because they're not like very,
it's interesting,
boisterous.
I think you can see that on American American social media too, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where they don't want war because realistically, despite all the talk of like, yeah, we can build, all these ships, we can launch, we have all these missiles. China understands that, when it comes to a fight, the United States would win. Well, we're gonna be some losses on our part, but realistically, we would win because the Chinese never fought a war. The Chinese are just now understanding the concept of joint operations. Well,
Right.
they
And they
understand
don't have an
it,
NCO
but
core.
yeah, they don't even have an NCO core, a competent one, I should say, that is able, to be comparable to Western NCOs,
Can I
especially
just
in the
talk
United
about that?
States, which that's what they want. Yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
I just want to make a point about that for the layman listening. When we say NCO, we're talking about middle tier leadership, right? And then upper, but lower tier leadership, not at like the strategic level and the senior non-commissioned officer. And what that really means when I say that is a concept of decentralized command and people being able to make decisions on behalf of commanders. And when you train as a U.S. service member, you learn the job of your NCO, and your NCO learns the job of the senior NCO.
Mm-hmm.
So that when that senior NCO goes down, that NCO can step up. And when that NCO goes down, that junior enlisted member can step up, right? Obviously, there's going to be some drop off in performance, right, when those things happen, but it's not you're not cutting the head off the snake completely and totally because you have decentralized command. Whereas in a dictatorship or a military that's run directly from the top down, those sorts of decisions would move slower, or the sorts of tactical level, operational level decisions would not be as efficient because the Chinese don't practice decentralized command to the degree that the U.S. military does and our allies, which is sort of one of the points as well of NATO, to teach other militaries to have a decentralized command format, I guess you should say, in their rank structure. And I've been to some of those. I've been to that academy before, the NATO Academy, so I could say that that is one of their goals, whether they're efficient at it or not. But to your point, with the Chinese military, I don't want to lose what you were saying, but yeah, no, the Chinese absolutely are focused on fighting the U.S.
Yeah. So the thing with the Chinese, them trying to develop, joint command, be able to conduct joint operations, be able to conduct, be able to conduct decentralized operations at the tactical level. You kind of don't really see that. You kind of saw during this year's Joint Sword, Joint Sword A 2024 A and B exercise, and then that little major exercise, the unofficial official Joint Sword 2024 C. You kind of saw them just now perfecting their ability to conduct, joint operations on a large scale. Now, does that mean are they able to do that competently? More likely not. They're probably going to still need a lot more time, a lot more of those exercises to be able to conduct those. Because, the United States, for example, we were able to do, I don't know if you're familiar with, Cold War era exercises, but we were able to do exercises across continents with NATO.
Yeah.
In like the 1980s.
Yeah.
With like
We still do those.
Exactly. And but the thing I want to highlight is that, that was like one of the first times we ever really done that.
Right.
And we did
You
it.
got the big history of it.
Exactly. And we did it. It wasn't perfect, obviously, but, there was very little issues from what I understand from those exercises. I want to say jump forager exercises. And I have a feeling if China were to conduct, or at least if we were to find, the lessons learned from that, unofficial exercise that occurred off the coast, off their entire coast in last year, I believe. I believe in November, we would find that they have a lot of learning to do.
Okay.
That,
Can you run us through that?
the spot. So I think one of the things that they would need to do is increase their joint cooperation, be able to communicate between services, because I could foresee that as being a continuing issue. There's always been that joint intercommunication has always been an issue with the PLA because it was primarily focused on the PLA ground force or army for its entire existence until the 2017 reforms, when when the army was essentially made equal to the other service branches, the Navy, Air Force, Rocket Force, and the joint joint service force. I forgot the Joint Logistics Force and the Strategic Support Force. Now, what that does is that there are no coordinating bodies. That's actually what the theater commands are for, or at the very least, a task force, or at least within China's case, it would be the theater commands. And so China never had done that type of operation because that sounds like a Western doctrine. Joint operations.
Right.
And so they would have to do a lot of forgive me, joint coordination, joint communication, intelligence. They're essentially going to have to take, what we learned in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the span of
Ewok, Gulf War, everything.
Exactly.
Everything, yeah.
Take all that and cram it down into 2017 to now, 2025. That's 8 years. Try to condense that into trying to figure this out, over 50 or 60 years worth of lessons learned into that time frame.
Are they trying to overcome that with technology?
Oh yeah, that's why they love AI, especially with intelligence and decision making. C2, they love it. That's one of the reasons why whenever it came out that Llama, Facebook or Meta's AI model was used by the PLA for, I forgot what it was used for, but it was actually used by the PLA. It was for C2.
Command and control.
Command and control. And everyone was shocked by this, and it was like, well, I mean, that's what they do. They know the learning curve is so steep that it would be impossible to overcome without some external help. And who are they going to rely upon? Russia? I mean, Russia disregarded their reforms as fast as they could during the first stages of the Ukraine war. And so they kind of figured, as you mentioned, pivot towards technology, because technology overcomes all, at least according to Chinese, or at least according to China. Now, will it work? I don't think so, because you're relying on a machine to conduct, to give you an answer, and by the time that you get that answer, it's a no answer.
I would say too that it could create a dangerous codependency as well.
Oh, it does. That's another thing that's well, I would say it would compound it, because there already is a codependency on centralized command. They try to take, this goes back to, having a competent NCO corps and a competent officer corps, at least at the junior officer level. the PLA understands that, they need an NCO Corps, but they also need to have officers that, you know, are not, who actually want to do the job, not pieces of shit. Actually will treat their subordinates like actual human beings, not like,
Right.
scum, like they've been historically known to do. Not to be able to, take advantage of, their families, bona fides to, ride the ride the hierarchy until they're able to, gain enough influence in whatever branch they're in.
Mm-hmm.
They actually want people who actually want to serve in wants to serve in the PLA as officers. Now, the problem with this is that, going back to what I mentioned earlier, that has been a thing for the United States military, Great Britain, for a very long time. Not so much with the Chinese. So you have a steep learning curve. And, one thing, especially with command and control, being able to take that commander's intent and be able to take what he said and be able to, distill from it, say, so second lieutenant in the PLA, I'm going to have to do X, Y, Z, and these are my objectives, and break it all down as, good first lieutenants would do. Now, how AI is going to help with this is that they'll be able to, essentially chat GDP this, for lack of a better term, or lack of a better comparison.
Yeah,
They'd
we
be
get what you
able
mean.
to say, so they can be like, hey, PLA GPT, let me have, here's the commander's intent, here is what I need, here's the objectives, make a plan, packing list, whatever I need, and it'll spit it out.
Right. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they view AI, for all the stuff that they come out now, like you've seen the robot dogs and the other robots that they've been using, that they've been actually incorporating. And a lot of people say, oh, well, this is Chinese trying to advance. Yeah, but it also shows you their limitations as well. And you have to focus upon that. Because
Yeah, I think in the past you said that the reason why they're so drone focused is to overcome limitations, correct?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because, so for instance, the dog that's actually used to, protect soldiers, to prevent them from dying, because, China has a population crisis. Exactly. Send in the droid. If a droid gets shot, who cares? But if, if a male gets killed,
Big
end
deal.
of a family tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing you have to think about. You have to look at it. Now, you kind of see the same thing with intelligence. They do a lot of AI work with their intelligence analysis, try to be able to bring up COAs and essential courses of action, IPB, intelligent preparation of the battlefield. They try to develop those to be able to do those, because realistically, they understand that intelligence is one of their weaker points. Because, joint, they never really, an intelligence, a tactical intelligence focused entity, the PLA was, until now, which is especially needed when you're conducting joint operations, at every level. Now, you have this lack of knowledge. You can try to, take what you learn from, being the PLA of old and try to, square peg it in. But realistically, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, it won't work. So again, that whereas AI comes in to be able to make those decisions with the on the behalf of the commander on the behalf of the S2, be able to help them out with that. But then also and this is one of the things where a lot of people don't really understand this, and it goes back to the centralized party control, because the PLA is the arm wing of the CCP. I always have to highlight that. And the reason why they view AI as being able to, as necessary, is because you don't want a commander being able to think too much.
Right.
You don't want that.
Right.
They see what happened in Tiananmen Square when you give commanders the ability to independently think too much.
Sure.
Didn't go too well.
Now, I'm kind of interested if you know anything about this new two of these things. The new 6th Gen Chinese fighter, which I think is funny using that term 6th Gen, and then their new Transmedium drone that supposedly they've got, which I'm sure the United States has. The United States doesn't feel the need to flaunt everything that we do have, but when I say Transmedium, I mean from water to air for anybody listening, and then back into from the air into the water. But I'm kind of curious. Let's start with this new quote unquote 6th Gen Timu Ingad over there, and then let's talk about this Transmedium drone in that order.
I think me and you share the same opinion about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think it's a 6th Gen aircraft. I had some interesting conversations with other people, and for the life of me, we don't even know what a 6th Gen is supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. Define 6th Gen for me. Not you literally, but you know what I mean. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. If and it's one of those things where I ask the person, can you define what a 6th Gen? Like, why are you saying it's a 6th Gen aircraft? Mm-hmm. Well, so and so said it, so it has to be true. I was like, okay, so if he tells you to jump off a bridge, you're gonna jump off a bridge?
It's like an info campaign.
Exactly. I mean, like it's essentially you're taking what Chinese state media, that platform of honest entertainment or honest news, long history of producing honest, legitimate news, what they said, and I don't really buy that, or at least what the Chinese social media. What the Chinese social media say.
It looks wildly like designs the United States has pushed out before for its next gen air dominance fighter. Like it is like identical.
Well, because Ching Fei probably had some help in that regard from the United States, from Lockheed Martin or whoever else has that contract. I'm not familiar who controls it, who actually is building it, but they've probably had some help. I wouldn't be too surprised, but they had some help from them by way of industrial espionage.
Huh?
Not a big surprise there.
Yep.
But just to go back to calling it a 6th Gen aircraft, it's like, really? I mean, come on, guys, let us use some common sense here.
Right.
Like, that's all I ask. I know I'm asking a lot for social media, but Jesus.
Yeah.
But no, I think for me, and I always point this out, is that this may be China's JH TAC XX program, that aircraft, or at least the aircraft for that program. Essentially going to be its regional bomber. So think B1, or if you really want to go tactical, F-11 Aardvark. Right. It'll probably be like that. It'll probably fit a similar role as that, because they already have the H-20, which is under development. Got pushed back to 2020.
You mean as like an EW, like electronic warfare? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean it as, well, it probably would have like an EW mission, but its main role would probably be like a bombing, be able to like drop ordnance on the targets, but it probably would have like a secondary
long range bomber.
role.
Okay.
Exactly, but for regional focus. But they already have the H-20, which has been pushed back to 2030, from what I understand. And so I don't really foresee it as being. I foresee it as being that instead of a, pure 6th gen. I don't really see it as being. It'll probably have some limited fighter capability, but not much, because if you look at it, it's not
Clearly
really
not its
built.
role.
Exactly. I mean, it may have like the ability to launch like a PL-10 or a PL-12 maybe, air-to-air missiles, but that's not going to be its main role. I highly doubt that.
Can we, just for a second, can we talk about 5th gen just for a second, right? To understand like what this means. Chinese 5th gen fighters are not even comparable to American 5th gen fighters. We talk about radar cross-section capabilities, things like that, right? So this is something I said almost immediately when that video came out of the 6th gen fighters. They can't even get their 5th gen on the same level as the United States. So how are they now at 6th generation fighters, right? It's just a propaganda tactic that they know that the news is going to run with, just the same way as when they had this hypersonic missile that they shot that circumnavigated the Earth, right? The U.S. Has, as far as not just intercontinental missiles that are hypersonic, but even air-to-air combat missiles and surface-to-air combat missiles, these or hypersonics, the U.S. has sort of roared up on these things, and they may have won. I think Alex Holling said it on his show, Air Power, pretty well, that they may have won the like the media war as far as like getting it out there first, but whatever the United States puts out there will be what would actually win a war, and it's a much more efficient operational and much more capable ordnance. And to even have an air-to-air hypersonic is not even something that the Chinese have talked about having either. So
They
anyway,
want one.
Yeah,
No,
for sure.
they want one.
Scramjet technology is look. I don't remember who said it, but it's like trying to keep a candle lit in the wind.
Essentially, India. I think out of all the countries that are trying to develop it, the United States, Russia, I think France, Britain.
Yeah.
Essentially, countries who actually have the ability to produce this indigenously have a proven track record of doing this. China got it muddy. I mean, do they have the technology? Maybe. They can most definitely steal it.
Are you guys talking about the J-20 as far as their 5th gen is concerned?
Yeah,
No,
J-20 is one of their aircraft.
No, I was gonna touch. I mean, I did a little tangent with the scramjet technology, because this is something I actually was interested in and looking it up.
I'm interested to hear what you know. Yeah.
But yeah, so essentially the technology, what you said is essentially true, but instead of a wind, it's more like a hurricane. Because it's going so fast that the flame has to be kept lit. At least the engine has to be kept lit, so it can go back, so it can continue to cycle.
Right.
Not only that, but you also have to consider, the temperatures.
Right.
So most of your alloys are going to be out. Conventional alloys are going to be out the window.
Yeah.
So what that leaves you with? What covered the shuttles? Ceramics.
Ceramics.
And so that's the reason why developing those ceramic materials exactly is kind of hard. And India finally was able to do it after like 10 years, but it's India. The Indian state is notorious for taking its sweet time in doing this. no offense to the Indian listeners out there, but your defense industry sucks.
When you do customer
just gonna be
service
honest
for
with
the
you.
world, everybody's pretty busy.
Well, I mean, they need to go ahead
not
and
even a
focus
joke, though.
upon we can laugh, but they
No,
need
it's
to
so
focus
true.
upon the customer service for the Indian Army or the Indian military, because at this
Yeah.
point it's like, come on, guys,
Yeah,
10 years, really?
I know.
30
dude.
years
Yeah.
for aircraft?
Listen, thanks
Really?
for being desk for the past 20 years, but maybe it's time to move on.
So if they call help desk for their military, do they get somebody who sounds like me?
Maybe,
I
hey,
hope so,
it's a good
man.
idea. There you go. Usually a
Posh British accent.
right. You're just a contractor that offers up your consultation services for the Indian military.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for calling TJ Services. This is Versatile and Black. We're going to talk about today, Decentralized Command with you and your comrades. That's you. It's on the news, dude. It's on the phone, dude. Press 1 for NCO. Press 2 for range days. Press 3 for range cards. Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's it.
But right, I would love to see that. But anyways, going back to the fifth gens, the J20 is one of them. The first one actually. The J20 was stolen, so the Chinese can outright steal the J35, I should say.
TJ, you can find pictures that are side by side of the J20 and the J35 with the F22 and F35. Just find them and pull them up. Yeah, they're like identical.
Cool.
Keep going, Joaquin.
Oh no! I was just gonna say all you had to do is pull up the J35 and F35 and just come on, man. Like, at least they made it smaller. That's
It
all
is.
that can happen. That's all I can say. So small.
Yeah.
But anyways,
That's it. It's radar cross section, isn't it,
Exactly.
though? Which is what matters.
no, it's not. It's kind of funny though, because the J20 is kind of outdated. They have the S, which is supposed to be able to conduct assisted wingman. I forgot what it's called. It's a two-seater where like the front, whereas the back, the rear passenger is the Wizzo/drone operator or
Yeah.
lower wingman operator. And then the front one's the
Yeah.
pilot. Yeah, there you go. On
at
the
those
top
noses, dude.
It's the same one.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, you
It-
can tell
it-
which the
it is-
American is.
Yeah, one does seem a little Timo.
It is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would
It's-
request a refund.
It's funny because like if you look at like the J35 at the contours of it, and this goes back to your point, Brandon, regarding the radar cross section. It's very straight, very. There's some lines in that, and so. But if you look at the J35, it's very contoured. It's very demure, if you will, very cutesy.
Very demure. Yeah.
Now, and while a lot of people on the Chinese internet say, "Oh, well, the J35, is able to do that because the F35 just needs to have like access for the fan or for," they're talking about the B variant, and I'm just thinking that's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
The three
Which you
variants.
said-
Yeah.
Exactly. The A, B, and C. I'm like, you could have just went with the C variant or the F or the A variant, but you went with the B variant.
Yeah.
Like
The
was you-
most
like
that if there's a redheaded stepchild in those three, it's that one.
you know what? That may be the redheaded stepchild, but goddamn, that is some fantastic aeronautical engineering.
No
They
doubt.
were able to exactly yeah. They were able to do something that the British could barely do with the Harrier.
Harrier. Yeah. No, that's
And
pretty
they were able
impressive.
to make that exactly. They were able to make that bitch aerodynamic without
Yeah.
being, naturally. Whereas the Harrier, if you try to do that shit, if you try to fly it, it's like trying to fly like one of those early Woolly Bird things.
Well, I don't know.
At
Schwarzenegger
least
did
from
it
what I
pretty
was
good
told.
with his kid on the side of it and shot a Libyan terrorist, I think, off of a missile into a building in True Lies. So
Well,
I mean,
he's
it can't be that
also
hard to
Yes.
fly, you know.
well, I mean, he's also a T-800. So I mean, like, let's be
You're right.
real. It's like it's a
Yeah,
machine.
true.
It was a machine driving a machine.
There, fair enough. You've solved it.
yeah. I mean, like, let's be honest. Skynet was in the will, not Jesus. Skynet
True. Yeah, you'll fire
or
it.
cockpit, I should say.
Right. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but yeah. So it just shows you that despite its advancements, its ability to be able to produce something like the J-35, because let us be brutally unbiased. China was able to produce something that France, Britain, Japan, Russia, especially Russia, India could barely do, or just now being able to, or in the case of Russia, not really.
No,
But in the case
yeah,
of the other countries, they can barely produce it.
Right.
I was gonna say the
With that being
Su-57.
said,
There's like what, like 5 Su-57s out there, some stupid, crazy low number.
it's like 12, I believe.
Yeah,
It's like a squadron's worth. It's like, yeah, it's a great. We're just making way for the Su-75. I'm just thinking, isn't that a more expensive fighter than the Su-57?
right. Like you guys can't even
Like-
mass produce these things. Yeah,
They can barely produce body armor for them. But anyways,
right. Yeah,
but yeah, so, but anyways, but when you look at them and compare them, especially the way that the skin looks on the two fighters, you can tell which one's the real one and which one's not really.
Yeah.
Like you can tell, like this is legitimate, whereas the other one's like
knock
painted
off.
metal. Exactly. And I wouldn't be too surprised if we do find out that the radar cross section for the J-35 is comparable to like what's its most comparable like fourth gen aircraft. I guess the F-16 probably
Yeah.
be comparable to that, if not FA-18. But the interesting thing about that is that they're now producing it. They now moved it to serial production.
What does that mean specifically?
Meaning that they're able to produce them in mass.
Ah, okay.
So they'll be able to produce them like the J-10 and like all the other Chinese aircraft that they have now. So
Is the intent to
They
sell
will-
them to other countries the way the U.S. does the 35?
Pakistan said that they have them and they actually sent pilots to train on it, but I doubt that's true because it's Pakistan.
Yeah.
I mean, and then like a lot of the news articles that came out with this was from Pakistani media, and Indian media amplified it. So I don't know how truthful it is. I want to see a Pakistani fighter pilot flying a J-35 into Islamabad.
Yeah, first. You're right.
Landing is optional. If they crash,
Just buzz the tower, buddy.
crash into it, please.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, defect to India too, please. If you don't mind,
Sure.
flying it would
Yeah.
be preferable. But anyways, but yeah. So going back to the J-35, that one, they call it a fighter. The J means fighter. It's more like an interceptor. You could just tell that by how big it is. Not only that, but I believe it has the IRST camera on it, as integral into the actual aircraft itself. So, you know, it's not going to be doing dogfights. It's going to actually be intercepting aircraft. And given that it's really big, more than likely it's going to go after refueling tankers, AWACS, command and control, things such as that. And they're not going to, tango with a F-22.
Sure.
Matter of fact, they probably would run away if they were to figure out like a F-22 was there. They probably won't make it far, but they'll run away.
If F-22 lets them know it's there.
It just pops up between them. It's like, hi guys.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you know about this new Transmedium drone, if anything? It's pretty new.
No, it's not. You're
No.
talking about the one that flies. It's like a
one that they just talked
you're
about
talking-
coming from the submarine.
yeah. It's like a big cylinder. It's like a cylinder, and like it's like a mini torpedo, and it goes up. As soon
Yeah,
as
but
it
you
hits
said
the
it's not
water,
new?
No, it's not new. They've been
Okay.
producing no, but they've been producing. Though I actually made a post about this.
Yeah.
About November last year, I believe.
Okay.
But these are not new. The PLA have actually been looking into this because of what it can offer. The one I'm talking about is called the NVIDIA drone. That was made in Shanghai. Now, the one that you're talking about is probably its militarized cousin. And so
it can go back and forth from the water to the air.
Right.
Yeah.
TJ Flying Fish. From what I've got here, the first kind of articles that circulated on it as a completed product were back in February of 23.
Okay.
Mhm.
Damn.
Yeah, they've
So
been
that's-
producing
it has
those.
been a hot minute.
Yeah, they've been producing those since 2019. Well, no, I'll take that back. They've been looking into that. They've been researching that technology since 2019, if not earlier. But they've actually have been producing experimental models since 2020, and now
Gotcha.
they have like a ready-made model. They actually have several of them actually. Varying sizes. That's the reason why I asked you initially, because it was just the big one that looks like a mini torpedo and is just launched out of a submarine. It's just like
Yeah,
all of
it
a
really
sudden
hit the
goes up.
news. Like the mainstream media caught it within either yesterday or today. I saw really started hitting the mainstream pretty hardcore. So
Yeah. They've been doing research into that. I know probably 2 to 3 universities actually have been looking into that seriously. Because the capabilities it offers. It's able to like go in and out of water at will. A fully autonomous flight, if I'm not mistaken, on some models.
yeah,
I know there's been some talk of trying to make them into like drones, loading munitions, if not being able to drop fragmentary bombs onto people. Because they're able to launch, because people are able to take them and launch them from the sea, and it just flies away.
right.
But no, they've been doing this for a hot minute now, and it's funny that the mainstream media is just now picking up on it because it's been a thing on Chinese media for like years now.
Okay.
They love showing those type of drones off.
Gotcha. Yeah, the one thing I just to tie this all up, and we can move on to other things, but just the info campaign that the Chinese run online with a lot of their technology is a part of this whole thing about needing to appear like they have an advantage at all times and beating the United States into the newspaper, so to speak, with some of this stuff and keeping up these appearances. This is something that's been going on for a while. The Chinese aren't even the first country to do this sort of thing by trying to push things out into the global media to make it seem like they have an edge. But people seem to forget that, and there's always so much doom and gloom fanboying for some of this stuff I see online. When really, I mean, you can go and find this sort of thing all the way back through the Cold War. The USSR was doing the same thing with this sort of propaganda tactics about getting stuff out, technology, right? We have these things, and I mean, we are absolutely in an arms race with them for sure. The United States knows that. Like, let's not downplay that at all. But the Chinese know they have to win that sort of media war as well, or keep that media war going, because it affects hearts and minds in the United States.
Mm-hmm. So, I think regarding that, you have to make it is a propaganda war, but then also there's a degree of truth within it. So I'm going to use the Type 054 Bravo that was recently unveiled. Yeah, they hyped it up as China being able to produce these advanced vessels. You know, it's going to increase the plan's surface warfare capabilities significantly. It's the best thing since Bowser. But when you actually look at it and compare it to other comparable frigates, you kind of don't see that. Yeah, it has updated armaments on it. You know, the 100mm cannon specifically was developed because they needed something with more firepower, but then also that wouldn't jam, as previous prototypes have been known to do, of that caliber, of the 100mm caliber. They're just now being able to, you know, make one of those effectively. But you shouldn't look at it as, you know, them being able to, you know, overtake the United States in developing this. No, it's them modernizing their military and finally figuring out that, yes, the first 054 variant was okay, but we could do better. Then the 054A came out. Okay, this is an improvement, but we can do better than this. And we're gonna you know, take the good of this and modernize the absolute hell out of it. And that's where you get the Bravo variant. So, and so that's how it evolved. So, yes, it's a major thing for the PLA, but for them, it's them modernizing the military. Whereas for us, we'll be able to produce, you know, the Arleigh Burke series or the Constellation series frigate because it's a proven design. It's able to conduct what we want. Whereas for them, they're still deciding what they want. And, you know, the Bravo variant is actually what they want. Now they just need to produce more of them. Now, with that being said, you know, what becomes of the 054 Alpha series or the A's? Well, they're either going to get sold to other navies, which the Chinese have been known to do. I believe Myanmar has a couple of them, Bangladesh, and other countries as well. But China also has this pesky habit of demilitarizing them, quote unquote, and making them Coast Guard vessels. So there's also that
using
aspect.
Them, yeah. And using them to harass Filipino fishing boats.
Well, they don't send them there, or at least they very rarely do, because they can send the Monster down there, which is bigger than than our Tioga class cruisers.
Oh, okay.
It's a pretty big fucking vessel.
Got you.
There's a reason why it's called the Monster.
Let's pivot off some of the tech stuff, and let's talk about the Arctic. Why, first off, why Trump is so focused on Greenland, but also what the Chinese are doing there, and sort of tie that into why, other than like minerals, okay, Is there's some rich deposits in Greenland with these minerals, but why Trump is so focused on having a foothold in Greenland?
It is China. I guess in order to talk about this is that, China sees itself as a quote unquote near Arctic nation, whatever that means. They just made it up on the fly to say like, yeah, we have interest here. We may not know what they are now, but we're gonna have some interest here, which boils down to trade and also oil and mineral extraction. Now, Russia Russia alienated all the other Arctic nations, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, United States, and Canada. So they need someone to actually cooperate with to produce or, to develop these resources and also develop, infrastructure there. China has said, that's me. Now, with that being said, the Russians are not stupid. They understand that getting in the bed with China would mean being the junior partner in a region that in their own backyard or in their attic. And so that's the reason why you kind of see this reluctance on China's part and actually allowing them to actually conduct a lot of joint exploration there. They'll help them train on how to conduct, sea and air ops in the Bering Strait or in the Bering Sea or, in that area, just so they can annoy, the United States to no end. But make no mistake, China actually does that to gain experience on how to conduct, maritime operations in the Arctic, so that the PLA could one day circumnavigate the Northwest Passage whenever it's able to. They actually have been developing, nuclear-powered icebreakers so that they can actually, take advantage of it.
How efficient are those nuclear-powered craft that they have compared to like U.S. counterpart? Yeah.
Well, we don't really. I don't think we have any nuclear-powered ones, but
okay,
the ones that we do have are old, and I think we only have like 2 or 3 of them. And I'm thinking I'm being overgenerous on 3. Yeah, and because that's one thing that you'll find out when you're studying the Arctic region is that, like Latin America, the United States actually has neglected the Arctic since the end of the Cold War, in which that goes into like a budget fight between the Navy and Coast Guard, because who's going to pay for the icebreakers? The Coast Guard is the Marine Corps DHS. They don't really get money, and the Navy doesn't feel like producing icebreakers because they don't really see the need. So
okay.
it's gonna be an interesting role.
Having a superior submarine force like the United States has, does that mitigate the need for icebreakers in the Arctic?
No.
Okay. I have a serious ignorant lack of knowledge here in this area, so that's why I'm asking these questions.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's better to ask questions than to actually like.
Yeah, I'm just hoping you can fill in the gaps. Obviously I understand the purpose of an icebreaker and why it's important, but just kind of wondering, if we're not going to build icebreakers and the U.S. Navy doesn't see the point in building them, then what's the strategy here? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Is that the United States strategy is to try to increase cooperation with other countries that actually have icebreakers to actually, either use them,
use our buddies'
to
icebreaker,
actually help us. Exactly, or at least help us produce our own, because
Russia's got a ton of them out there too, don't they? In the Arctic, Russia's got a lot of icebreakers, a lot of vessels out there.
They're the main ones who actually utilize a lot of nuclear. Exactly. That one, and I forgot which other country. I think Finland. No. It was it's either the Finns or the Norse. They're known to make a good icebreaker. But no, like submarines, yeah. I mean, you're gonna have them under the surface. They can vary. I mean, you've probably seen the pictures of them surfacing, breaking through the ice. They very rarely do that because the conditions need to be just right, or the conning tower will get smashed. So that's the reason why, despite having a superior submarine force, you need icebreakers. You need those survey vessels to be able to project power into there. You could do it with planes, but realistically, you're talking about a different set of concerns because de-icing is hell up there. The P8s, the C-130s are able, to barely do it, and so you're trying to put a P8 up there. That's just a recipe for disaster. I wouldn't be too surprised if they tried, or if the thought came across their minds, and better heads prevailed and said, let's not do that, because if that crashes, the Russians will be able to get it first, and we would like to keep that technology from them.
For sure.
But no, like so the reason why Trump sees the value in Greenland, and this is kind of goes back to the brilliance of him, is the fact that he understands that Greenland sits in a strategic area. It does. That's where we actually have a large base for early porting missile defense system at
Thule Air Force Base.
Now, now he understands that if the Danes doesn't want to control it, and the Greenlanders, I think that's how you call natives there,
I think you're right.
want independence. Okay, yeah, I was going to call them Eskimos, but I kind of figured, that's
I think we're safe
right.
with Greenlander.
Okay, so the Greenlanders want independence. Who would benefit more from independent Greenland, and who would have the cash to actually help out with any BS projects that they would want that no one else would fund? China.
Right.
So realistically, it's kind of a strategic brilliance on his part, and understanding that it's key terrain, it's strategic. Not only that, but he understands that China can come in, and despite all its economic issues that it has, it can still throw cash at it. It may not be a lot of cash, but it's more than what Greenland and or not Greenland, but Denmark and the United States and other countries in Europe probably come up with. And so for him to come out and say, yeah, we need to either annex this or let us have control of it, lies in the fact that China may actually try to one day come through there and establish a permanent research vessel that is, or a permanent research presence that is kind of illegal, not illegal. I forgot on which island that they have that is situated up there, because they have been known to do that, and they've actually gotten into a lot of trouble with the Swedish authorities. I believe it's a Swedish-controlled island, by holding up a Chinese flag and wearing, PLA. It was outdated camouflage, but PLA fatigues and holding up a Chinese flag and taking pictures. It was a tourist group, and they got into a lot of trouble for that, because usually whenever that happens, we all know what comes next. So that's one of the things that it's strategic brilliance on Trump's part for probably seeing that and understanding that, hey, they're signaling their intentions. We
Right.
kind of need to take this away from Denmark, from the Danish.
And since we don't have fleets or anything that really have any of these icebreakers prominently to help our military ships get through, if we did absorb Canada kind of as is proposed and purchase Greenland, then we kind of take that Arctic presence away from Russia as well. So, or at least get a real good stronghold there.
Yeah, what is Canada's capabilities when
I
it
mean,
comes to icebreakers and the Arctic?
They're pretty good. I would say on land they're pretty good. They live there. The Air Force. Yeah, the Air Force is pretty. It's decent. Their F-35s. They've been trying to see how far they can go in that environment. I don't know the full extent or the results of it because they keep it, hush hush. But they do publicize it. They do deploy them out there. Let me say that before we all get in trouble. But shipping wise, naval, it's decent for a country its size. The Coast Guard, it's somewhat capable. That's where the icebreakers are. I believe they have eight icebreakers, but they're mainly
Going through them between
deployed
the heavy,
to the
medium, and the light class. They've got a total of 23 of them that are still in commission. I'm looking at them all right now, and kind of a spread here with by name that are still operating, and then they've
for
got
icebreakers.
Yes. Yeah, and then they've got two
Okay.
air cushion vehicles they use for, kind of like hovercraft almost, that are used for ice travel as well. Take you across the top of it,
Okay.
from the water
Right.
straight onto the surface of the ice. But yeah, they've got a few heavies, but a
They've
bunch
got-
of lights and mediums.
We've got friends with cars.
A little bit, or some we might take from them.
Yeah.
We'll be bad kids and we'll snatch away their
Right.
toys.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
The mean
So
kid on the
I guess.
playground.
So my question, TJ. I mean, I know that's doctrinally, but is it 8 operational, or is just like a list?
All of these are currently operational, but their heavies are very limited. They only have 3 heavies that are commissioned. All the rest of them are either light icebreakers that are like high endurance multitaskers, or they have a series of a few mediums as well that have cranes on them and stuff like that. So they've got 3, 4, 5,
Okay.
6, 7, 8 mediums that make up the majority of that fleet. They don't have that
Okay.
massive capacity like the Russian ones do, and they're not all they're not nuclear by any means. These are a combination of nuclear and diesel, both. So
That makes sense. That makes sense because I remember the heavies were out of commission one time.
yeah, the heavies
And-
that they've got rolling right now is they've got the CCGS Louis S. Saint Laurent, the CCGS Terry Fox. You scroll down, it's all the way down here at the freaking bottom, and the CCGS Henry Larson.
Yeah, and those 3.
The one's rolling.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, those 3 were having issues because they're old.
Yeah, a few of them look pretty old here for sure.
Yeah, I think those 3 are the main ones that were. I want to say they were built during the Cold War or just after. And
Let's see here.
I want to say that, but
The Saint Laurent was built in 1968.
That's pretty old.
That's
Very,
how
very
old
old.
it is, man.
yeah.
You think that
So
there?
that's the.
I was gonna say that you think
No,
there'd
go
be
ahead.
there's some conversations going on between the White House and whatever the fuck Canada has going on right now since Justin Trudeau fucked off about upgrading fleets, right? And working together to upgrade fleets because Canada obviously has to have a pretty robust intercoastal force when it comes to the Arctic because of just pure geography, you're right? But they would seem to me they'd be a great strategic ally. I mean, we are, but a great strategic joint force to go into Canada, or excuse me, go into Greenland with, and work alongside one another as well. But I'm also not in those positions. So
There probably have been some discussions, maybe not in the Greenland because, Canadians are nice. They don't like to invade. They like to do war crimes. Um, they
shotguns.
probably have their shotguns and like throwing canned food at as enemy soldiers and like shooting them whenever they get them.
Yeah.
But there probably has been talk about like there probably have been some talk with developing some type of intercoastal relationship or cooperation, especially regarding icebreakers, and maybe even some joint patrolling, because you kind of see that now with they're intercepting Russian and Chinese aircraft that come near Alaska. So that probably extends to, or that probably will extend to, to any, operations in the maritime domain. So with the, especially in the Arctic, because, they have more icebreakers. They're old, but they have them. Now regarding joint building of new icebreakers, I want to say they've actually have looked into it, but they probably have thought like, okay, can we even do this? So
Okay. Before one of the last things I wanted to ask you, unless you had other things that you wanted to talk about, was getting your take on the Taiwanese government recently coming out and saying, that they were going to cut the budget, and that the opposition government sort of got a victory there, and cutting the budget, which to me just says that the CCP's influence inside the Taiwanese political structure is growing. It sort of shoots them in the foot, right? It makes the defense of Taiwan a little bit more difficult here when their budget gets cut by so much. Here we go, tinfoil hat time.
God, you had to pull me back in, didn't you?
I did.
No, I'm surprised you actually heard about that. Because not many people are talking about it. Or at least I haven't seen it in Western media. But it has been a thing in Chinese or in Taiwanese media.
Yeah. No, that's where I went. That's where I look around the Taiwanese media pretty often. So
yeah. So what you mentioned is that there was a I want to say in early June, and early January, the budget, the KMT and TDP unilaterally voted a reduced budget, which forces the DDP government to potentially slash a lot of funding for, defense, housing, electricity, and several other things. Like it was like someone just took red tape and just like a red marker and said absolutely not. And every time I say this, or every time I read about this, a new development. Because now they're going to have like now it's at the Constitutional Court to see if it's valid or not. I don't know if they had it today or they had it, or they will have it either next week or not. But it does say a lot that the KMT and the TDP are pushing a lot of bills, because they pushed a lot of bills that besides the budget that would make the DDP's a job harder to govern in general, like seriously, and throughout all levels of government, whether it be legislative, judicial, or executive. They're making it they're going to make it very hard for them to actually govern. And it got me thinking, and that's the reason why the tinfoil hat's on, is that the two countries, if the roles were reversed, the KMT and TDP would be bitching to the moon and back. They would have to go to Beijing to get the talking points for the KMT, or at least in the point of the KMT, they would have to go to Beijing to get the talking points, but they'll be complaining nonetheless. And I do agree, it just shows you the level of influence that China likely has on some of the more prominent people within the KMT. Because, excuse me, because the KMT is actually in control. The TPP is with them because they don't want to be aligned with the DDP. That's essentially what it is. And it's shocking to me that the only person, and it hasn't really been talked about in the Taiwanese media about who this benefits. It has been talked a lot in the Taiwanese, academia and like other circles, that the only people that actually benefits this is China and the KMT whenever next elections come by. So yes, because now all they have to do is sit back and blame all the economic issues, the lack of defense budgets, the lack of the increased rent, decreased job prospects, the lack of diplomacy. They could say, well, it's not our fault, it's the DDP, you voted for them.
Right.
See what happens when you don't vote for the KMT?
It's a plausible deniability there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, to me, this is the sort of way that the Chinese take over the island, right? Is that I know the Chinese would much more prefer that to be a political decision on the Taiwanese behalf to say, okay, yep, one China, here we are, and rather than having to go to war.
I wouldn't say it would be it benefits them in that regard. I would say it would benefit them with having the KMT come back into power. And that's when you can talk about, slowly but gradually increase in control or increase integration, like what happened during the Ma administration.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, is that eventually, that's how the Chinese would hope, the CCP would hope this could happen, is eventually a pro-China government takes over the government of Taiwan, maintains control for a significant period of time, changes some minds, and eventually reunifies with China politically. And that's how it's done, rather than going to blows to the United States, because that would mitigate the entire, need for the United States to say we're guaranteeing the sovereignty of Taiwan. If they say, we're pulling up, we don't want you here anymore, and you need to leave, basically.
Exactly. It would be, but it won't be a sudden thing. And then also there's no guarantee that the plan will work, because as you've probably seen, a lot of people are pissed about this plan because they see
this hamstringing the Taiwanese
BS.
government and their military, their self-defense, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Huge blow. It was like $5 billion or some shit like that, like a huge blow.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a quarter.
Like a lot of like a lot of defense programs that are needed.
That's what
for
it was.
Taiwanese. Exactly.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Like,
it's
in question.
Correct. Yeah. Which is exactly the sort of thing, if you're the CCP, you want to see. But I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that and bring it to people's attention, because, like you said, like it's not something you're going to turn the news on and hear about. But these are the sorts of things that are happening that are going to make a difference eventually, right? These quiet things going on in the news about the KMT cutting the budget, self-defense budget for the island of Taiwan. Right, this is a huge chess move that got little to no fucking news attention, right? Like, if they can keep getting these wins back to back to back to back, like this is how that happens.
Well,
that political
see, they're
takeover.
able to do that because they have outright control of the chamber. So of the legislative beyond, they can do this. Like, and it's like whenever they initially voted on the budget in December, I found it funny that they were blocking the DDP legislators from coming into the hall.
I remember.
It was kind of, I was like, you should just let them in. You're just pouring more fuel under the fire, guys. Like, just let them
Pretty
vote.
stupid.
You have the majority.
Yep.
You have the majority. Like, but no, you want to be dumbasses and do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is. I wouldn't say it's like part of their plan to like. I wouldn't say it's an outright way to get control of the island. I would say they're trying to make it as hard as possible for the DMP to do that, to run a government, and their hope is that them recalling would eventually somehow prevail them into power, and then that's whenever your plan that you've talked about. That's when it would begin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So forgive me if I'm like, go ahead.
Now I said that political reunification process.
Yeah, because like they understand that like they just can't go off and do it because they tried it before and it failed. It's actually how they got into the situation.
For sure.
And so now they just have to. So now they have to play the game, and they're playing it pretty well.
Well, brother, before we wrap up, what are some areas that you think people need to know about? There's some info that should get out there that you are talking about on Sino Talk, and just as a great way to sort of close out here to inform the audience.
Yeah, so we were supposed to talk about this during the show, but if you're a U.S. service member or any way connected to the U.S. military, and you downloaded the app called
or whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
Xiaohongshu. Yeah.
Xiaohongshu,
Yeah. If you downloaded that app, Xiaohongshu, just little Mao's little red book.
Yep. I use my little line. Yeah.
If you downloaded that, go ahead and self-report yourself to the security manager. Bonus points if you actually posted yourself on wearing like any type of military uniforms.
Yeah, you're a fucking retard. I'll just say it that way. Plainly, if you posted yourself, or you posted like some idiot posted the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. Some people posted from the inside of other aircraft. Like, you're a fucking retard, and I'm just gonna say that to you. I don't care how many feelings I hurt saying that. Like, that is the stupidest shit I've ever fucking heard. Your social media presence is not worth national security in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And just the fact that, like, this is what used to tick me off so much before I got out of the military. It's just how little the younger generation of military members don't give a fuck about anything like that. They get told about it all the fucking time about operational security. They get told not to post certain things online. They fucking do it anyway. And like, some of them get hammered, some of them fucking don't. But it just shows you like how selfish that is to fucking sit there and do shit like that. Like, this whole culture of loose lips sink ships, right? Like, that's a real fucking thing. Like, entire military operations have been ruined because of idiots who can't shut their fucking mouth. And here you are posting yourself on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier on your fucking phone, connected to a satellite out in the middle of the fucking ocean, and you're putting it on a Chinese fucking spy app that's run by the CCP. Like, you were the dumbest motherfucker in the world. And like, I know I'm being super aggressive, but like, if this is you, like, fuck you and stop.
No, it does make sense, and going back to what you meant about spyware, it is. Mm-hmm. If you thought like people like, well, TikTok is the same thing, I'm like, no. TikTok actually has, cybersecurity, standards, whereas, Shanghai doesn't. It has so many vulnerabilities. It sends like all your data via clear text. It's hilarious. that like, and then not only that, but like your contacts on your phone,
Yeah.
your contacts on your on
Email.
your apps, on the app that you email, they're all known to the Chinese government now. Like, and you know, people said no, they're not. I'm like, yeah, they are. Read the fine print. Go find a Chinese person or go find someone who knows Mandarin, and actually make them read.
Use a
it.
GPT. You need to find somebody.
Like, exactly. So it's one of those things where it just boggles my mind to see that, like, to see that happen, especially with the C-17 pilot. And I'm like, so you took videos and put them onto your, I forgot, on her fake Instagram or fake Red Note account.
Right.
Of inside of a platform that is heavily looked at by the Chinese government on a Chinese app.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
All for what, views?
It's there forever now.
Jesus fuck.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know. It's downloaded.
That's what I'm saying. It's there forever.
and it's,
like it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It just boggles my
Chinese.
mind, and I'm just thinking, you know, if you, then on top of that with the on another note with Red Note, if you truly believe anything that's on Chinese social media, like the majority of it at least, go touch grass. Go outside. Go touch grass. Go touch water. Go pet a dog or something.
Petting dogs are good.
A whole bunch of our crazy
pet
screaming,
rabbits.
blue-haired lefties over here that lost their minds over TikTok being shut down for a whopping 14 hours and dumped themselves prematurely over to Mao's Little Red Book. I mean, they were talking about how nice everybody was, what a welcoming environment it was, and how we
Like
can
they're
all be
fucking
friends. They're just
refugees,
like
bro.
us.
Refugees,
Yeah,
you know.
they're-
It's just
they're all
Which
going, "They're
it's-
just
it's-
like
right.
us."
It cracks me up because it's not even just
It's-
the lefty blue-haired people, dude. It was a whole mess of people. Like that
Oh,
fucking
sure. Yeah,
Da-
there was others for sure.
Yeah, like that
definitely. I
guy
mean, there was a
David
huge-
Zhang did a video where he had like a couple people who were talking about it. They had some fucking fat ass in an Indiana Jones hat was like, the one thing you
Yeah.
don't like is the government telling me what to do. Like, okay, so you took your fat, McDonald's Happy Meal ass over to fucking Red Note and signed right on up, right? Like he said, like
Yeah.
you're a fucking retard, like 100%.
Did you see the people
Exactly.
buying the phones on eBay?
No, what is that?
Oh, dude. Okay, so if people deleted TikTok in their little fit, anticipating the shutdown or whatever, the
Shit.
app stores stopped allowing you
Stop
to
having
reinstall
it.
it for
I-
longer than it took for
Right, I remember.
for you to actually be able to re-access it. So
They
people
still
were
haven't put it
selling
on.
cell phones that still had it installed. Some people
No
were paying
way.
anywhere. One sold for $16,000 to some
Mm-hmm.
moron who had to have their freaking TikTok back, dude. Dead
Are you
serious.
serious, bro?
Mm-hmm.
Just
And
give
they're
me
not
your
even
16 grand. I'll do something better with it.
And they're not even like jailbroken. Like some of them are like just fake phones. So, like they're not even real. Like they're like AT&T like models. I'm like,
I wish I
you're-
would have
you're
known.
idiots.
Getting like a 2002
I
Blackberry.
wish I would have thought about doing
Yeah.
right. Yeah, we still had the little like hard plastic scroll ball on it. Like yeah, bro. I wish I would have
doubt,
known
dude.
that was a thing. I would have downloaded TikTok and sold my phone for fucking 20
For
grand.
real. Oh yeah.
Who
they're
gives a
mad
shit
mine.
at that point? Let's go, dog.
No
Right?
doubt, brother.
But no, another one would be like this is also going like TikTok. The reason why I say don't go touch grass is that you understand like the stuff that like I could finally afford. I would be able to afford groceries, because everything's cheap there. You fucking idiot. Like they artificially keep the yuan low. It's no stop. Go play in traffic. God.
Oh,
God, I'm gonna
I know,
drink.
man.
But no, I think another thing, is to watch out for the South China Sea this year, especially between the Philippines and the Chinese, because the Philippines just released today that they're gonna do another arbitration case against China. This time about environmental damage that China actually done. And so China's going to complain about that. They're probably going to do a lot of mischievous things against the Philippines. So that's not going anywhere. And then going back to Taiwan, pay attention to, the cable cuttings or cable cuttings or attempted cable cuttings. Right? There's been a lot of those lately around there. And, one of the interesting things that the last one was actually north of Taipei.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It very rarely happened there.
I just want to point out that we brought this up. We've said this several times on this podcast about these things happening. And we've said this, I've ranted a few times on this podcast about an old fucking supervisor I had, essentially, that was arguing with me about World War III and it being a digital war. And it's sort of like this 6th gen argument we were talking about. And, define digital war to me. What do you think that means, right? And she couldn't. Mm-hmm. And, I asked her if she knew if there were internet cables that ran under the ocean, to which she did not know. And, here it is happening. I told her, like, those things will get cut off at some point. And, yeah, they will. And they have been. So, fuck.
Mm-hmm. It boggles my mind that, like...
That's right.
Exactly. It just boggles my mind that people don't, like, put... It whenever the first instance that of a Chinese vessel cutting a cable in the Baltic happened, G Captain, the person who runs that, the owner of that, came on and said, yeah, Xi Jinping, he must be some diabolical mind to think to be able to send a person, to send a vessel to cut a cable. Yeah, these are just old vessels, man. I'm like, no, like don't. This is something that that's what China wants you to think,
right?
Like they've don't, and then it's funny because it was on a YouTube video, and the YouTube comments lit them up, especially from people who are from Taiwan who told them, no, this is something China actually does. Matter of fact, this happened like 2 months ago off the coast of Matsuo.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that was like the last time he ever publicly talked about it in that way. Because, he made himself look like a complete idiot like he was. Because China does these things, especially around Taiwan, just to, essentially fuck with Taiwan. Those islands, either have to deal with, like, cut the cable. Your only way is through satellite communications, which takes time and a lot of money to burn, or you go through the mainland. So they would rather burn the money. The Taiwanese would. Not only that,
but the China.
TJ?
I was going to say a lot of people miss, but Chinese researchers were actually applying for patents for submarine cable cutting devices, all the way back through 2023 and 2024.
Holy shit!
So that's
Try
straight up on the record, brother. As well. Oh wow! Those
are the latest and
Russians
greatest.
were also boasting on on their local television networks that cable cutting could freeze Finland, like they were talking about it, like it was something they were intending on potentially doing. And that was on the Russian side. So.
Mm-hmm. But they've seen how effective it is. But no, like those cable cutting, the cable cutters, they've been known to do that. They've actually have looked into that. I mean, those are just the latest reiterations of, like, those tools that China does, that China produces. But no, but the other reason that China actually does this is to gauge the reactions, not only to the Taiwanese, but also to the United States, to see what happens. Because, remember, you can't really prosecute these type of crimes unless you actually have hard proof of it. That's the reason why the Solar Express polar bear, the investigation is still ongoing. They still trying to figure out, like, who exactly did it. Well, I think they came out and said, like, yeah, it may have been, this one, but we're not sure. But I believe the investigation is still ongoing. But again, it just goes to show you how hard these to prosecute these crimes. Not only that, but as you near Taiwan, like the last time, it just increases the tensions. Not only that, but you'll be able to see how well the Chinese will be able to see how well the Taiwanese are going to defend these cables, because those cables connect to the capital region. They solely exist to they solely exist to serve the Taiwanese, the New Taipei area.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's very wild.
But like what you said before, Brandon, no one talks about it. No one. And it just boggles my mind that no one does.
I think that it'll probably start getting more attention now that Trump is in office. These things will probably start hitting the news a little bit more, and there'll probably be things that he mentions as well. So whether or not when he mentions them, they'll get the actual attention they deserve, or how will the media and the left spin it to be something that's a nothing burger, even though like something like the budget of Taiwan for its self-defense, I don't know how you could spin that into a nothing burger, but I get surprised all the time by the liberal media. So, but yeah, anyway, Joaquin, where can people find you? And I know you have a Substack and you're online as well. You're more than welcome to cross post with us as well, because you have some great info that gets out there. If you guys have a deep interest in these things, I highly recommend a follow over there.
Yeah, so you could find me on a lot of platforms now. Sino Talk on Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon if you have it for some reason, YouTube, which I'm slowly but surely producing videos for that channel, in addition to the live stream that I host on every week, mostly on Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, where I actually do discuss various events throughout the Indo-Pacific region, not just China and Taiwan. But no, the videos are going to be going to be forthcoming. I do have a Substack that's inactive. I may bring it back, but then also have a LinkedIn page as well, where I do post on there, as well as post the majority of the articles, as well as the newsletter I run as well, the Indo-Pacific Bulletin. So
awesome, man.
Yeah, you can find me on those platforms.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you again for coming on. You guys, if you want to go and watch some of our other episodes with Sino, they may be a little dated now, some of it, but there's still some great info on those episodes that is definitely still relevant, some history, just some, if you want to broaden your view on the Indo-Pacific and then understand deeper the connections. I know we've talked about like the Trans-Pacific Partnership before with China and the United States and sort of Trump, and then Obama's approaches to those relationships and things like that. So if you guys want to broaden your understanding of the relationship the United States has with China, you can go check those episodes out. There's some good info, and then obviously go over and give Sino a follow and check him out as well. But thank you so much for coming on with us again and talking. Thanks for the tinfoil hat intel over there. And if you guys have ever seen like David the Gnome, if you remember that, that's what we're looking at over here. It's like a Hispanic Santa Claus with a fucking tinfoil gnome hat on. So, but anyway, yeah, man, thanks for coming on and hanging out with us for a couple hours.
Thank you for having me, Brandon and TJ. I really do appreciate it. I know we've been trying to have this for a long time, and it's great to finally make it happen.
No doubt, man. I know we'll have you on again at some point throughout the year. So we tend to touch tips every several months or so. So, and just to check on what's going on over there on the other side of the ocean. So,
yes, sir.
All right, guys, let's get out of here.